Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a relatively recent game. This is one from I think last week. It's about a week ago, something like that. So this is the Shinonome, which is reasonably unique in that it is a premium ship that you can get for free, but more unique in the sense that it is the only one that you can get from completing a campaign. This is, I think, the Honourable Service campaign reward. Basically, you completely finish all the stages of the campaign and it gives you a premium tier 6 destroyer for free. And it's a pretty nice one as well. It's the classic Japanese torpedo destroyer experience. It's got reasonably good stealth for tier 6, but moreover it has 9 torpedoes in triple launches is what I was trying to go for there, with a pretty short cooldown. The only real downside about the torpedoes is the relatively restricted angle. They're also not super fast or anything, but hey, Japanese torpedoes usually aren't. So overall, it's a pretty nice package. Doesn't have particularly good AA of course, but it's a mid-tier Japanese destroyer. None of them have good AA. So we started off this game with a strangely YOLOing Omaha. That cost me a reasonable amount of health. I honestly don't know what that strategy was other than rush in and die, which is exactly what they did. Cost me a little bit of health in the process, but it was a kill as well, so that's rather nice. Even with hydro going, they still ran into one of my torpedoes just because they were, well, rushing face first into an angry smoke cloud. As you can see, epicenter game, so it's all going to be focused around the mid-cap. There's also no carriers around, which is quite nice when you're in a Japanese destroyer. All I really have to worry about is surface spotting from other destroyers, and although at this tier, technically you could run into some radars, I mean, especially tier 8 radars, they're not uncommon. It's less common to see radars than in your higher tier destroyers, I'll put it that way. I'm using my guns a bit here. Sometimes people tend to ignore Japanese non-gunboat destroyer guns, but they are actually pretty good, and Shinonome does have 6 of them. Not a particularly fast rate of fire, but yeah, they do have some utility, and I will actually use them several times through this game. Unlike the Kagero game I just featured though, it's not going to be quite as mad and hectic as that one was at times, but still a little bit. There's going to be elements of that at moments. So it's not quite the classic stay stealthed and only torpedo things game either, but maybe a little more so than Andy's Kagero match. So far, it doesn't look like anyone else is going to be rushing madly forwards into my torpedoes, so it's time to maybe move around a bit. That left flank is a little awkward in terms of doing torpedo things with all the islands there. The other side is a little more open, so that's where I'm headed at the moment. And we also have a pair of ships over there with probably a destroyer somewhere in front of them, given that we spotted one that was over there. Although it might still be lurking behind the island as well. That's entirely possible. We do also have another destroyer that's not actually accounted for yet, which also could be over on that flank, so who knows. Like I say, it is the preferable flank when you're in a destroyer, generally speaking. Although having said that, sometimes those west flank islands can make for very good ambush spots if somebody isn't paying attention, or you haven't been spotted over there, or they don't have hydro, or whatever. So, angry shooty smoke cloud, that would appear then to still be a destroyer in there, and so let's put some torpedoes out towards them. There's a relatively quick reload on these, so you can kind of spam them around a little bit. It's what, a minute and change, and of course if you have adrenaline rush and captain skills you can shorten that even further. So there's that other destroyer. They are actually both there. Z-31 I'm not so worried about, but that Icarus I don't desperately want to get into a gunfight with. The Icarus, at least I know, is the only one that has hydro, and it's a pretty short-ranged hydro at that. The Z-31, well, it doesn't have much going for it, let's be honest. It's hard not to look at some ships sometimes and think, yeah, that's the ship they've purposely made bad, so you free XP past it. And Z-31's definitely one of those. Now, this was a slightly hairy moment. I was thinking, okay, it might be going back to port, but Icarus does not have particularly long-range torpedoes, so fortunately and completely as planned, obviously, they ran out, and therefore I was absolutely fine, and definitely not thinking that I was about to get sunk. So the Icarus smoking up there, so if anyone's going to be going after those allied ships, it's going to be the Z-31, and then you can see the torpedoes going in their direction. So yeah, just as I was having that thought, I looked over and, oh yeah, torpedoes. So maybe I can go and screen them a bit, because Z-31 I'm pretty sure I can outspot, even though it's not by a huge amount. Z-31 does have somewhat okay stealth for a tier 7 destroyer, but tier 7's not a good tier overall for doing stealthy things. So it's kind of saying it's the better end of a bad bunch, really. And I have to say, tier 7's probably... I know I do mention tier 7 destroyers stealth a lot, but it's kind of a pet bugbear of mine. But yeah, considering that you've got Hyder with like 5.7 or whatever it is, and then you have things like the Mars with 6.8. 6.8 the worst? I don't know. You can obviously build for worse stealth if you are doing gunboaty things with the Valkyrie or the Minsk, perhaps. But yeah, 6.8 is among the worst ends, so there's quite a gap there. I mean, a kilometre doesn't... Well, a kilometre and 100 metres, or possibly 1.1 kilometres would be the non-awkward way to say that, but when do I ever do things the non-awkward way? Yeah, it might not sound like that much on paper, but it is actually quite a lot. So some speculative torpedoes across the middle there. We have a nice points lead, and we also have a ship lead at the moment as well, but these last couple of enemies are proving to be quite tenacious. They've dug themselves in fairly well behind those islands, and we are losing some ships still, so we definitely haven't won this one in any decisive way just yet. My thought at the moment really is just try and chase down that Z-31, and that then basically frees up my allies on this flank to be dealing with ships across the way and not having to worry about getting torpedoed from the north by a destroyer that they can't see. But before I can really get that close, the Icarus pops up again, spots me, and so I have a little bit of a shooting match. And this is where my turret arrangement actually comes in quite handy. Having two turrets at the back makes it quite good for kiting away. Isn't the Kagero the same? I should know that. I've played it enough. I'm actually out of gun range of the Icarus, but of course the Z-31 is keeping me spotted. Unfortunately, no one else is shooting at me right now, so I just need to get unspotted again and try and pin down where that Z-31 is, and then we can deal with things across the way, because we're losing ships. We're actually now starting to close the points gap. We just lost one of our top tiers, that Caracciolo, which was in a bit of a dicey position where they couldn't then back out. This Z-31, by the way, spotting them at that distance, they cannot have possibly had concealment expert. So yeah, that's a way to take a painful ship and make it even more painful. Maybe someone just didn't have the spare XP, or the elite captain XP, or even free XP. Although dumping free XP into commander skills is quite an expensive business. So even with my low rate of fire, it's just a 31. He's not even focusing on me. If I had one salvo off, and then he's also then just firing HE at my battleship allies. So yeah, not a particularly big threat to me, but more of a threat to my allies, so it'll be good to get them taken care of. And it does look like that Iron Duke isn't going to last too much longer. We do have some reasonably healthy battleships left, but yeah, so do the enemy at this stage. Nothing else in range, so let's just stagger these drops a bit. I mean, there's no real reason to stagger them, it's just that's what I ended up doing. I was trying not to spam all my torpedoes out at once, and this way at least I do have a more minimal gap in terms of torpedo reload, because you know, there's a big difference between waiting 60 odd seconds and 30 seconds, but as it is, it's actually the first lot that managed to get the Z-31, who hadn't really moved in their smoke very much and was relatively broadside to me, so yeah, one was all it took, and that is one less enemy, because we're now actually even on ships and they are ahead on points. This has started to turn against us a bit. That western flank, where they were all kind of nestled in behind the islands, they were able to take care of my friendlies that were over there. And at this point, they are pushing that flank, and the rest of the team is all a bit scattered across this side. That Z-31, for as largely ineffective as they were in terms of doing damage, I mean, I think they landed a couple of torpedo hits, but they also tied up quite a lot of my allies' attention. So we are now even, which is not great. So, half health Fuso, that would be a really good one to take out. I would also like my allies to take out that Leander, who has got Hydro and nasty AP. There's also the Icarus around somewhere. And the Icarus was, I think, one of the more capable enemies in this game. Just occasionally, especially in a destroyer, you'll run across someone who is, how do I put this? A more annoyingly capable foe than one usually encounters in random games. And I think that Icarus certainly counts in terms of how they were playing smart. But I don't know how much damage they've done. I mean, they've certainly managed to get that... I assume it was them that capped. It would have been easiest for them to cap. So, yeah, they're certainly playing smart in terms of their positioning and engaging and disengaging. They haven't tried to get into any extended fights with me, because when I have been using my guns for the most part, it's been when I've had allies relatively close by. So, you know, if they're revealing themselves by firing at me, they're also putting themselves at rather a lot of risk, even if they could gun me down in a 1 versus 1. Fortunately, the Fuso running aground actually has put them into a wreck, and they didn't have damage control available, so the last little slither of health got taken away by flooding. Unfortunately, at that moment, the Icarus popped up again, but here's where having some allies close by is proving to be very, very useful. Somebody's just taken a huge chunk of health out of the Icarus, so I'm able to finish them off with relatively little health lost myself. All that's left of the enemy team is battleships, which is good for me, but we are still behind on points. And the West Virginia's not looking super healthy. The Akatsuki certainly seems to be playing the more cautious torpedo game, but they've also lost some health themselves, so they've obviously been a bit more closely engaged at some point. The Devonshire is the main thing on my mind at the moment. I was thinking, I've got 2 smokes left. I can get into a position where I can smoke them and actually give them some cover to shoot at things that are within range. And there's no Hot Wheel command to say, I'll smoke for you. So you can either type it in chat, which, to be fair, here I didn't, but I also tried to make it really super obvious that this is what I was going to do. It would be nice, actually. Oh no, wait, there I did say in the chat, I'll smoke for you. And I'm guessing this is one of those instances when someone just doesn't speak English, which is always the difficulty when you're trying to communicate on the EU server, and so all my attempts to get this guy's attention, just not paying any amount of attention at all. So there's a bit of a surreal moment here. I've just blown this smoke screen. I'm actually now putting myself at risk of getting spotted by the Dunkirk. There we go. I am spotted by the Dunkirk. This Devonshire, who had survived up until this point, they just threw all caution to the wind, completely ignored my smoke screen, which, if they just turned in a little bit, they could have had the benefit of that. And now, well, they're about to get blown up because they put themselves in a really weird position of just YOLOing in front of enemy battleships who have now completely nailed them. Maybe that was the entire point of that, was to try and get their torpedoes off, but it didn't work. So yeah, one of the enemy battleships has meanwhile gone down, but our only battleship now is the Andrea Doria. So it's me, the Akatsuki, and that Andrea Doria, who doesn't particularly have good firepower. It's been buffed twice now since release in terms of its SAP shell damage, so yeah, it's clearly not been performing particularly well. I have been unable to get this mid-cap, sadly, but I can at least try and distract the Dunkirk, so these remaining two battleships are not ganging up on my allies. And I do have a slightly hairy moment there. The Dunkirk, I think, has been firing HE the entire time. They certainly were against the Devonshire, but against me, the HE could do a lot of damage. So I have to be careful here, especially as Dunkirk is fairly fast, and Shinonome is only a couple of knots faster without the speed boost, or even Spood Beast, if you want to pronounce it the completely correct way. So I have a slightly awkward time here when I'm trying to make drops. I can't get that far ahead, so I have to take the risk because the torp drop angles are not super good. While I've been leading this Dunkirk away, though, the Yukon got sank by the Akatsuki. So this is just the last ship we have to deal with, and we can probably call this a win at this stage. But it's ended up being a really close game. We looked like we had a pretty decent lead at one point, and then I don't know, a combination of a good push from the enemy team and our own team becoming a bit too scattered, a bit too fragmented, meant that it's ended up being just a couple of ships versus just a couple of ships. So with the Dunkirk turning and that bleeding off some speed, they're actually going to eat a couple of torpedoes, and as they are no longer looking at me, I feel free to or I'm feeling free to engage with my guns, but they are just about heading out of range, so this is a bit tricky. They're also trying to heal out of a flood, it looks like. And if I can just get fire going or something, that would be really nice. And there we go, there's the fire. So even if they take damage from somebody else, maybe, just maybe, this might be a Kraken. So there's the Andrea Doria. Does a fairly minimal amount of damage. I don't know if that was AP or SAP, it was hard to tell from this distance. SAP would have been the better choice there. The 320 mils don't do particularly great work at bow on targets, even something that's not particularly well armoured like a Dunkirk. So fire's still burning away. Oh, he's getting very close. And the Andrea Doria's got to be almost reloaded. So yeah, that's AP. And as it happens, just that final tick of damage, the Andrea Doria doesn't quite do it. That final tick of damage was mine from that fire, and that was the Kraken. So not a super high damage game, but yeah, it had that surreal moment with the completely oblivious Devonshire just charging in. We had the suicidal Omaha at the very start, and a really nice close end. So yeah, that was actually a fun match, even if it wasn't a super high damage game, but it was still a decent score. 2400 base XP is not too shabby at all. So yeah, that was a fun little game, and as I've said, if you are unaware, this is a ship you can go and get yourself, by just spending some time grinding through that campaign, and yeah, it's a really nice little reward at the end of it. So that's it for this replay. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.